Jamaica's National Commercial Bank could become the first indigenous company to be listed on either the New York Stock Exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange. It's a remarkable turnaround for a financial institution that was ailing 10 years ago. In 2002, when Lee Chin's AIC Limited acquired a 75% stake in NCB, net profit was 1.9 billion Jamaican dollars. Last year, under difficult recessionary conditions, the bank's profits soared to over $11 billion. I sat down with NCB's chairman Michael Lee Chin, who told me, among other things, that a team of investment banks is already in place to launch the initial public offering and what it meant for Jamaica on a whole. I want to talk to you about the possibility of the IPO for NCB with a view to listing on either the Toronto Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange. First of all, tell us how that came about, the idea. Some may say the preposterous idea of seeking to list a Jamaican company on the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, Owen, this is part of the initial dream. When AIC became involved with the National Commercial Bank in 2002, not being brought up in banking, I thought, so now that we have caught this Mr. Dog, the analogy was the dog chasing the car. What are you going to do with this this car, Mr. Dog? So now that we have gotten the bank, what are we going to do with it? Well, if you were to look at some models, you have ING Bank and AMB Ambrose, both hail out of Holland. And those two banks together, put together, they're independent, but if you were to consolidate them together, they would represent the number 5 largest banking group in the world, hailing from Holland, a country with 12 million people. So I thought, banking, obviously, being eminent in banking, isn't a function of large population or small population. It's a function of brain power. And we have lots of brain power in Jamaica. So why can NCB, this was back in 2002, not in the near future compete at that level and become eminent at that level, not just within Jamaica?
So that was part of your dream even 12 years ago?
When we took the bank over in 2002.
So what's happening now? You want an IPO. How is that progressing?
Well, the IPO, and it's not just a listing on a developed market exchange. It's an IPO. So the IPO will be somewhere between 200 US million and 300 million US dollars, of which 175 million, the maximum of 175, will go into the bank's coffers. So what it means is the bank's balance sheet will be even more strengthened. Already it is very strong. It is, the tier 1 capital is 16% versus regulatory requirements 10. US banks were like 3, and they're now bolstering their capital ratios. This IPO will take the tier 1 capital to a little shy of 23%, which is very strong. So the bank is going to be even more so fortified, meaning it will be able to withstand any shock. So that's the first thing it means to the bank. Secondly, it means that if we see there's another crisis, and there are opportunities, and by the way, there are crises all over the world at all points in time. So when we see a crisis and we see a situation whereby we thought would be a good addition to the National Commercial Bank, whether it be in Colombia or Argentina or the Dominican Republic or the United States or England, doesn't matter. It's not a global playing field. We can be a participant. Prior to the listing, which is now, we would just have to sit at home and suck our thumbs. So now it's tantamount to you, Owen. We all knew that Usain Bolt was a phenomenal athlete before he went abroad. We saw how he ran. We could compare his times versus global times, but he was never on global turf. When he went on global turf, our projections were borne out. We are on NCB by any measurement, by any standard. The management team has done a wonderful job by any standard. But we have never really gone outside to international turf. We've just been within Jamaica. So the IPO will now give us that opportunity to compare with global peers, not just local peers.
I want to talk to you about your shareholders now, the bank's shareholders. Are they likely to vote on any issues surrounding the IPO? Also, when the bank gets that enhanced capital, will it in any way change ownership, or are there some clauses to preserve ownership?
Very good question, Mr. James. Yes, because the bank will be issuing additional shares, and the ownership interest will be diluted on a percentage basis. But Portland's holdings, AIC's holdings, will be the most that will be diluted. But that's on a percentage basis. But the bank will now get this incremental capital on its balance sheet. So the entity will be a lot stronger. So we may own less but have a stronger entity. As far as Portland Holdings is concerned, we don't intend to go below 50%.
Portland Holdings will have a minimum of 50% ownership.
Yes.
So although the ownership will be more broad-based,
yes,
you will retain that 50%.
Yes.
How so?
How so? Because we just want to make sure that we have that control of the bank in terms of its share ownership. Going below 50%, you just don't know what is possible thereafter. Above 50%, we can sleep.
What does this mean for Jamaica? A veritable, assuming that the listing is a success, what does it mean for Jamaica, the Jamaican economy on a whole?
Well, it means a lot to Jamaica actually, because Portland...
Will it give it a psychological boost?
It should. Yeah. It should, because no different from when Usain goes on international turf, it gives all of us a psychological boost. This will be the first Caribbean company to not only get a cross-listing on a global economic, or on a global developed market exchange, but it's the first company to do an IPO, to raise capital on a global exchange, equity capital, first time. So it now will give the bank an opportunity to be compared not only in its business metrics, but also on a stock valuation basis. Because currently, the bank is being compared in a local domestic market to other peers. And this market is an inefficient, illiquid market. If we are successful in our listing, then we will be compared to all banks in the world, and more specifically, banks in Latin America and Caribbean. And banks in Latin America and Caribbean region, they're valued differently, much differently than how we value banks in Jamaica. So shareholders will get the benefit of that difference in valuation.
Now, a shareholder of NCB with his ordinary shares today,
yes,
he'll benefit from this this IPO.
Yes, because a shareholder, once and if and when this is done, a shareholder in Jamaica, there will be a mechanism whereby we can interchange our NCB shares here, which we could, as of now, we can only trade on the Jamaican Stock Exchange, but there will be a mechanism whereby we'll be able to trade it on the developed market exchange, whether Toronto or New York, and or we can pledge those shares to a foreign a brokerage house anywhere in the world. It's called margin those shares, borrow at their rate, which in the States is now 3%, borrow at 3%. So we know shareholders in Jamaica now have an international currency that you can walk into any brokerage house. We now have an international currency that you can walk in any brokerage house, sell the shares or borrow against them at the rate of borrowing that is current and prevalent in that country, whether you're in Japan or New York or Toronto or England.
What investment bank has been selected to lead this initiative?
We have selected our syndicate, but it has not yet been, it's not yet public. But what I can say to you, it's top tier. Top tier.
You know, when a bank has made such strides, or indeed any company has made such strides in 9 years, the staff must have played a major role in all of this. What do you have to say about the team at National Commercial Banking Group?
Much respect, because when most recently when the investment bankers came to look at what the National Commercial Group represented and how it is comprised and how it managed itself, they were all astounded. It is always a source of fun to me.
They came to do their due diligence. Yeah.
And invariably, there's always the difference between perception and reality. Because they're thinking they're coming to Jamaica to look at this bank in Jamaica, this Jamaican bank. When they come, invariably, they are astounded. By any measure, it is a bank that, compared to any bank in the world, it is eminent. And that's not coming from me, the chairman. It's coming from outside people who have looked at the bank, who are experts.
A good team is always the main plank behind any successful company.